This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcasting Network. I am your host for today's show, Thursday's edition. I am your host, Josh Strickland, and we have a jam-packed show for you today. We're going to talk about the NFL schedule. It's coming out soon. We'll talk about under-the-radar free agents in the NBA. We'll talk about SEC schools in the Southeast starting to announce that they're coming back to campus in the fall for in-person instruction. We'll talk about the Earl Thomas situation that happened just a couple days ago. And then, of course, we'll do a draft recap of the Washington Redskins as part of our draft recap series. That's edition number 2, I believe. We've only done 1, so I'm assuming it's number 2. So we're doing that. But first, we're going to talk about international NFL games. This kind of ties into the schedule, but I wanted to talk about it first because it's kind of a bigger deal just because it's international. But the last time the NFL did not play a regular season game in London was in 2006, and they announced that they will not have an international series, which they usually had one in London, and then they started a new one in Mexico City. So the NFL this week formally announced its international series won't occur this season because of the COVID-19, the coronavirus, which is a smart thing to do. I don't think anybody denies that that is not a smart thing to do because, one, even if they do hold it in those stadiums, there won't be fans allowed, more than likely, which kind of makes the whole point moot. It's just a moot point at that point because these games are made to gain an international audience, to gain more fans. And if fans can't be at the game, then there's no point in spending all that money on travel and all that money on the stadiums and stuff like that. Just to do that. So, they've played 28 games in London so far. There have been plenty of rumors of a team, mostly the Jacksonville Jaguars, moving across the Atlantic and moving to London to play games there. The NFL has created a solid fan base in the UK. They had 4 games scheduled this year, with the Jacksonville Jaguars playing in 2 of them, building on its once-a-year excursions since 2013. So, like I said, clearly this is the right decision. Predicting the immediate future of international travel, as well as whether the United Kingdom will allow large gatherings in the fall, is a fool's errand. That said, there is little doubt that the NFL's nearly decade-and-a-half experiment in growing a fan base from the soccer-mad UK soil is now set back. So Tim Crow, a UK sports consultant, says it's definitely a hit for everyone, but for anybody who is on long-term strategy, which this is, it's tough to have a bump in the road. So all sports, of course, are encountering this unique and unprecedented issues during the pandemic, but for the NFL in the UK, there are special challenges because the annual games played there have been critical to building one of the largest fan bases outside of the United States. Do they lose momentum? Of course they do. It's entirely understandable, acceptable situation, and people are going to move forward from this, obviously, because, this has never happened. It's happened before, I suppose, in 1918, but the NFL wasn't planning on expanding. I don't even think the NFL was around in 1918. I think they joined in 1919. So the NFL didn't have plans of expanding back then, expanding into Europe, into the UK. But there is a reality that for at least for the next few years, international travel is going to be limited. People are going to have some doubts and concerns about international strategies other than for broadcasting things that can be done digitally or without physical presence. Mark Waller, a Brit who helped craft the NFL's London strategy from 2006 through 2018 as a league executive and remains an outside advisor, said the sport remains committed to the UK and overseas. It was Waller who championed regular season games in the UK, the partnership with Tottenham to play 2 games a season in their new stadium, and was a frequent voice for believing the NFL would one day have a UK franchise. The owners remain fully committed to the agenda, and I kind of know that because I stay in touch with a lot of them, said Waller, who is now executive vice president of the McLaren Racing in Formula One. I think it's just a hiatus while this lasts. I don't see it as any more than that. In fact, I would argue it will fuel the desire from the UK to have more. That's assuming it's just a 1-year hiatus. There's already talk of the now 2021 Olympics in Japan being scrubbed entirely. It was originally scheduled for August of this year, 2020. The league's global ambitions may be robust, but they do matter in a virus-ravaged travel and entertainment industry. Part of the NFL's appeal in the UK is that it's in-person spectacle, unlike in the US where the sport is primarily a TV event, like I mentioned before. I mean, there's no point in going out of your way to go to these different countries if nobody can go watch the game, you know? So, Waller continues saying what will happen, which I think in some ways there are many analogies to what happened after 9/11. I think there will be a whole construct around health and travel and kind of working practices and fan event practices, but I don't think the underlying result will be that people will stop looking to globalize. I think we need to find a way to keep pursuing the global agenda, but do it within whatever the new normal is going to be. Of the 32 teams, none took a bigger hit than the Jacksonville Jaguars, whose transatlantic strategy is critical to keeping the team in North Florida, one of the league's toughest markets. A team spokesman said club president Mark Lamping will not be discussing London. Our focus right now is on preparing for the coming season and renewing season tickets. We can address London at an appropriate time, said a spokesman. The Jaguars are the only team with an office in London and have an exception to the league rules in order to market the club to the UK. Most importantly, the game in London sold out high-priced Wembley Stadium and its 90,000 seats compared to Jacksonville, where the team has had to, in past years, unfold tarps on swaths of empty seats. The Jaguars London initiative, which Lamping called a critical part to our future during the team's 2019 State of the Franchise presentation, accounts for about 13% of what the team calls local revenue each year, and that figure would have likely approached 20% this year with 2 games at Wembley. Of course, with the possibility of the NFL teams playing in spectatorless stadiums or venues with only a few thousand fans, losing the London revenue is just one of the many obstacles teams like the Jaguars will face. It will have some impact on the Jaguars, there's no doubt about it, but this pandemic is having an adverse impact on a lot of businesses, and the Jaguars are going to have to deal with a few situations, a few problems that are unique to themselves because of their transatlantic schedule. So, no more international game. It puts a dent in the NFL strategy to expand into Europe, expand into the United Kingdom. It puts a dent into the Jaguars' revenue stream a little bit there because they played in the UK. And I mean, reading this, I didn't realize that they got a lot of money. They got that much money out of the UK. I didn't realize they got almost 20% out of the UK. I mean, that's insane. 20% of local revenue. I mean, that kind of makes it, that brings up a more interesting point. That kind of makes it a little bit more obvious that the Jaguars will probably make a jump to the UK in the future once the NFL figures that out. But right now, we cannot do it. We cannot do it now, of course, but overseas games, they always seem like a slap in the face to the home fan base. They always seem like the NFL doesn't care about that home fan base, especially the Jaguars. But I mean, apparently the Jaguars' ticket sales aren't as good as they are in London. So I mean, it's a great business move on their part. It's a great business move on the NFL's part, because you can get a whole new country to embrace you as a sport. Then I mean, you're doing something right. But there you have it. No international games this year. We might not have international games for a while, depending on what happens if we get a vaccine or not in the upcoming year. So international games are put on the back burner for right now. So the NFL, their strategy takes a hit, especially the Mexico City one, which is brand new. They've only played a couple games there, because I remember it got canceled a couple years back. But there you have it. International NFL games are gone for the upcoming future. When we come back, we'll discuss the NFL schedule, which is coming out soon. Teams are starting to tease it a little bit, but we'll discuss that when we come back.
You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, so we discussed the international schedule is canceled, but the highly anticipated NFL schedule, especially amongst the rumors whether or not they're going to push the season back or there's going to be some kind of change in the NFL schedule coming up for the 2020 season. The NFL has made it clear that they want everything to be business as usual until their hand is forced. So it's very interesting that they are releasing a full 17-week regular season schedule for 2020. They're releasing that tonight, Thursday night. They're also releasing a preseason schedule, which I think it's kind of safe to say that preseason might be scrapped, at least for this year. It really depends on how everything continues throughout the next couple months. So, I mean, this is highly anticipated because everybody wants to see what the NFL is thinking about doing. I mean, football has been a big topic throughout this whole thing. I mean, yeah, basketball and baseball and hockey, they're suspended for now. I mean, MLB, they might come back. They might come back starting in July, but NBA, they're still figuring their stuff out. Hockey's still figuring their stuff out. NFL and college football, they have the pleasure, not the pleasure, but they have the advantage of not having to deal with this during the season. They have time to plan for this, time to get organized and ready for this. But right now they are planning everything business as usual. And because of that, we have a schedule coming out tonight, Thursday night. The annual schedule release has become an event of itself with a primetime broadcast slot on the NFL Network and coordinated social media push between all 32 teams, which you've kind of already seen it a little bit with some teams as they've announced. Like I saw the Giants, they did the thing where you screenshot their thing and you post whatever it was, but it was like screenshot who the first opponent for the Giants is going to be, but it was all like different cowboy logos. So, I mean, they're kind of hinting at that. Usually this is a chance to make plans for the fall, book hotels, for road trips, go through all 256 games one by one to predict wins and losses, which we'll probably do at some point. Some of that will continue this year with a major caveat. Everything on the 2020 schedule is subject to change because of the coronavirus pandemic, of course. It's impossible to try to speculate today what things will look like in the next few months. So we're preparing to play the season as scheduled, said NFL spokesman Brian McCarthy. The NFL is privately considering contingency plans for the fall, but won't comment publicly on them at this time. And Commissioner Roger Goodell on Wednesday evening instructed team officials not to comment or speculate on the status of the 2020 season. For now, league officials are proceeding with the assumption, however optimistic it might be, that September 10th, the NFL will be cleared to kick off. So here's a primer for the schedule release. What will this schedule look like? It's going to look exactly like a typical NFL schedule. You have 16 regular season games spread over 17 weeks, one bye week per team, of course, because the new CBA doesn't come into until March or next March in 2021 at the earliest. So the season is expected to start Thursday, September 10th, with a primetime game. Typically, the reigning Super Bowl champion, in this case the Kansas City Chiefs, will host that game. The schedule will include Thursday, Sunday, and Monday games, as well as several Saturday games in December. As per usual, they usually play Saturday games in December after college football has concluded their regular season, so the NFL can sneak up on Saturdays as they've been trying to do for so long. But that pesky college football is just sitting there. So this version of the schedule will lead into a postseason that includes an expanded playoff field with an extra wild card game per conference, a bye week between the conference championship games, and Super Bowl 55 in Tampa on February 7th. The schedule also assumes the league's new stadium, SoFi Stadium, home to the Rams and Chargers in Inglewood, California, and Allegiant Stadium, home to the Raiders in Las Vegas, will be completed and open on time. So there's a lot of little caveats here that we don't really discuss. But what is different? The league announced earlier this week that because of the pandemic and the work it takes to play games overseas, the 5 games scheduled to be played internationally, like we discussed, for the United Kingdom and 1 in Mexico City, will be held in the United States. So the teams would have to be designated as the home teams in those international games will host the games at home instead. What a novel concept. This change most impacts the Jacksonville Jaguars, who are going to planning on playing 2 games in London this year. So why do they release the schedule now? The league actually delayed the release of the schedule by 3 weeks, though that likely would have happened even without coronavirus-related disruptions. Brian Rolapp, the NFL's executive vice president and chief media and business officer, said in late March. So they were gonna delay this anyways, whether or not an international pandemic was happening. So I don't know what the reason for that was, but taking a few more weeks gave the schedule makers more flexibility to build a schedule that would more easily adapt should the league need to turn to any of its contingency plans. We will be prepared to make adjustments as necessary. You've seen that already this offseason with free agency, with the virtual offseason program, and likewise with the draft, McCarthy said. We will continue to make decisions based on the advice of the medical community and in full compliance with medical recommendations. So what are these contingency plans? The league won't address any of them publicly yet, though, but the expectation is the schedule will be even more backloaded with division and conference games in case the league is forced to cancel games early in the season. The playoffs could theoretically be pushed back as well to accommodate an October start to the season. It seems unlikely the NFL would pursue any contingency plans that involve neutral site games or some sort of sequestrian plan like the NBA and the MLB are thinking about doing, with just putting everyone in a little bubble and just letting them live in a bubble, I guess. When can teams return to their facilities? Various states and cities begin lifting their lockdown orders. The league on Wednesday evening revealed the first phase of its plan to reopen team facilities. Those plans, according to a memo sent to all 32 teams, include allowing up to 50% of non-player employees, up to 75 total, to return to the facility, and the implementation of various COVID-19 related protocols. Teams must create an infection response team and designate an infection control officer, and individuals entering the building are subject to coronavirus screening, including having their temperatures taken to check for fever. All employees will be required to wear cloth face masks. Players will be allowed inside the building for medical treatment only, and non-essential medical treatment, including routine physicals, are still prohibited. Plans for how to safely open training camp remain fluid and will largely depend on public health and medical advice, as well as state and local regulations in the summer. So what about the preseason training camp? The preseason schedule, 4 exhibition games for each team, plus the Hall of Fame game between the Steelers and the Cowboys, will be part of Thursday's announcement. This is about a month later than usual in 2019. For comparison, the initial preseason schedule was released in April 9th with dates and kickoff times announced in early June. Plans for how to safely open training camp remain fluid and will largely depend on public health and medical advice. The first step will be figuring out how to safely reopen team facilities for coaches, staff, and eventually players. The first phase of the remote off-season program runs through May 15th, at which point officials from the NFL and the NFL Players Association will decide if there is any way to hold in-person meetings or workouts, or if the remainder of the off-season program will continue remotely. So let's say games do kick off September 10th. What happens then? NFL officials have been in contact with executives of other American pro sports leagues, as well as international leagues, as they try to envision what live sports will look like in a post-pandemic world. The NFL is likely hoping the NBA or Major League Baseball resumes first to provide some sort of blueprint for reopening stadiums and assuring the safety of players, employees, and fans. Maybe the stadiums will largely be empty. Maybe fans will be allowed inside after going through coronavirus screening. Maybe fans will be required to wear masks. None of those decisions really have been made yet. The first glimpse of a potential NFL plans came this week from Miami Dolphins CEO Tom Garfinkel, who in an interview on Good Morning America revealed plans for hosting games at Hard Rock Stadium with social distancing precautions that include limiting attendance to 15,000 fans and takeout-style concessions with online ordering and no alcohol sales. So what about the actual games? We've known the matchups and locations of 2020's games for months, but Thursday we'll finally know when they'll take place and which teams have been picked for primetime. We should expect to see plenty of the Chiefs, 49ers, Cowboys, Packers, and Saints in those Sunday and Monday night slots. Here are a few of the 2020 highlights. You have Chiefs at Ravens, featuring 2018 MVP Patrick Mahomes versus 2019 MVP Lamar Jackson. Has the makings of being a game of the year and potential AFC Championship game preview. Bucks at Saints, Saints at Bucks, Tom Brady versus Drew Brees, sign us up. And the game in Tampa will feature Jameis Winston's return to Tampa, but he's going to be Brees' backup, so it doesn't really matter that much. Bucks rarely played in primetime, but Brady's arrival should change that in 2020. Giants at Cowboys. The NFC East is always interesting, for better or for worse, but we want to see Jason Garrett coaching the Giants offense in his first return to Dallas since the Cowboys decided not to renew his contract. Broncos versus Chargers. The AFC West pulled off a rare free agent swap when cornerback Chris Harris Jr. left Denver for LA and running back Melvin Gordon did the reverse. The fact that both players were 25 makes the swap even more fun. So those are some highlights for 2020 so far, but we'll see who all gets the primetime games when that schedule gets released tonight. We'll probably talk about that in depth on Sunday, but when we come back, we'll talk about some under-the-radar free agents in the NBA when we return.
You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA, from the UFC to extreme cage fighting. They got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
So believe it or not, NFL free agency not NFL, the NBA free agency will eventually start, and we don't really know when it's going to start, but it will eventually start. Free agency though, especially in the NBA, it is the highlight for some fans, the highlight of the NBA. NBA free agency is always very interesting, always very intriguing, and you kind of see other sports starting to try to make their free agency a little bit more intriguing. You saw it with MLB this year. You saw it definitely with the NFL this year with the quarterback market and all that stuff going on there. But nothing beats the craziness of NBA free agency, and I really don't know why NBA free agency is always so crazy. But there are some under-the-radar guys that need to be discussed, and we'll discuss them here. These are 10 under-the-radar NBA free agents for whenever NBA free agency finally starts back up. So we'll just start off. Christian Wood, Detroit. So he doesn't really count as below-the-radar free agent, except for the fact that he played for the Detroit Pistons, and nobody really watched the Pistons. He's pretty good. He's freaking good. Locked in a reserve role much of the year. Wood really got cooking right before the season got coroned into oblivion. Since Detroit traded Andre Drummond and Wood took over in the middle, he averaged 23.2 points, 9.9 rebounds per game on a 56.2% shooting in Detroit offense that had very few other viable threats. The night the season shut down, Wood went head-to-head against Joel Embiid and finished with 32 points on 14 of 18 shooting. He's not just a dunker either. Wood shot 38.6% from three this season. This wasn't just some rando putting up empty numbers on a bad team. He was really good. He's 24 years old. He's already played before this season, except when he was dominating the G League. Ironically, he slipped in the draft due to questions about his work ethic and desire, questions that seemingly should be answered after a half-decade journey to this point. Advanced metrics have him as a top 10 center in 2019 and 2020 season. Past performance doesn't predict future results, and the market for bigs in general will be tepid this offseason, but Wood should be a target for any team looking for a starting caliber big. Michael Carter-Williams over in Orlando. He had perhaps the most significant season that nobody talked about. He quietly revived his career from the brink of extinction as a shooting guard on the Magic bench unit that was pummeling opponents just before the season stopped. Carter-Williams' final 3 games before the hiatus read like a player who couldn't possibly be Michael Carter-Williams. After going more than 3 years without scoring more than 15 points in a game, he scored 17, 16, and 20. He made a 3-pointer in 7 straight games and made 24 of his last 25 free throws. His season-ending 2-point percentage, which was 48.9%, blew away his previous career high, and his PER was 15.7, which was a career best as well. So he's a rangy defender at 6'5", who can cover both guard spots well. He's been around forever, but is still only 28 years old, so he should still have a couple good years left. 3-point shooter remains a weakness. He finished 29.4% last season at 3, but the optics on his stroke look considerably better, and he's letting it fly more willingly. On the right team, his skill set can really be valuable as a third guard and spot starter. Derrick Jones Jr. of Miami. He's 24-year-old hybrid forward coming into his prime years. This guy is much more than just a dunker. Most notably, Derrick Jones is a freak at the top of Miami's 2-3 with his length and mobility, but he also offers surprise rim protection. 2.9% block rate, and the league's second best among perimeter players from a non-center. As with Carter-Williams above, Jones has shooting questions that may make his market a little bit more tepid than otherwise. He only shot 27% on threes and is at 27.6% for his career. But that's okay when you shoot 67% on twos. Read that number again, 67%. 67% from a 6'6" forward. Jones is very effective finishing plays from a dunker spot or off cuts to the rim, and he's a whirlwind in transition. Up-tempo teams in need of help at either a forward spot should be digging on Jones, especially since his best years could still be ahead. He's an unrestricted free agent who, like Wood above, carries a low cap hold of just $1.7 million, and he has full bird rights with Miami. However, the Heat may get squeamish about paying him past next summer when they're trying to keep their cap space powder dry for a run at an elite free agent. That could provide an opportunity for another team to swoop in and grab Jones. Chris Boucher, Toronto. Whether you call him Block, Quaybook, I don't know what that says, or the Swatter Boy, Boucher is one of the more intriguing rising free agents. First, the body and history gave a pause. He has knee issues. He's already 27. He's probably the one guy in the league with less girth than Brandon Ingram. But in today's NBA, motion beats muscle. Boucher brings the energy with career rates of 4.1 blocks and 16.1 rebounds per 100. He still fouls too much, partly a consequence of his slender frame, but cut the rate to a slightly more reasonable 6.9 per 100 in 2019 and 2020. Lack of feel has been a problem in the past as well, but he clawed his way to an even assist turnover rate this season. Boucher has shot threes since college, but has struggled to do it well. He's 29.2% in his limited NBA career and made 29.7% across 2 seasons in the G League. The eye test says the shot looks a bit better than that, but his stretch resume is shaky. However, Boucher is still a young 27. He took up the game in his late teens and is still developing. DeAnthony Melton, Memphis. Miscast as a point guard in an uninspiring rookie season in Phoenix. Melton was freed to unleash his havoc off the ball in Memphis last season and erupted with a well-timed breakout year. A restricted free agent thanks to a 2-year minimum deal he signed with Houston 2 trades ago. Melton is now looking at a nice payday. Teams are capped on what they can offer him by the Gilbert Arenas rule, but which prevents a team from losing a young restricted free agent who doesn't have full bird rights. Thus, Melton's likely end game is signing a full mid-level exception deal, or a bit less, with a suitor and seeing if the Grizzlies match. While suitors with enough cap space can go even beyond that and give him the Tyler Johnson special, 2 years at the MLE, followed by 2 years at a greater number. That seems rich for a player with Melton's resume. However, it might be enough to make Memphis flinch on matching. Lugens Dort, Oklahoma City two-way NBA season does resume, the Thunder are going to be in a very interesting position with Dort. Normally, if a team has a two-way player it likes, the team signs him to a multi-year contract toward the end of the season and have him locked up for the following season. But because of the abrupt hiatus, the Canadian guard is built... the abrupt hiatus in March prevented Oklahoma City from executing this move with Dort. He's a Canadian guard, built like a strong safety, but at age 21, he offers considerable promise as a defensive stopper, especially taking over the role from Terrence Ferguson as the year wore on. He's a huge minus on offense, though, but he isn't hopeless. He's a restricted free agent, and the Thunder will have no bird rights, but is melted above the Gilbert Arenas rule prevents teams from offering more than mid-level exception. Josh Jackson of Memphis, Dirty Harry of this free agency class. Do you feel lucky? Jackson played just 357 minutes for the Grizzlies this season, but his performance in those minutes was a vast upgrade on his first two seasons in Phoenix. Jackson scored 24.6 points per 100 while posting the first decent true shooting mark of his career. He only played 357 minutes, but Jackson also played 26 games in the G League and was one of the best players in that league. He's only 23. There could be something there, or it could be a mirage. Memphis is capped at paying Jackson $8.93 million in the first year of his next contract because the Grizzlies declined his fourth-year option. That gets interesting because it's about $1 million less than the projected mid-level exception, which roughly half the league will have available. Jacob Poeltl for San Antonio, non-spacing center who's seemingly flown in from 1985. 7'1" Austrian seems to be an odd fit in the pace and space era, but for teams that play drop coverage, he's extremely effective and is good enough to start. With a good basketball IQ and better feet than you think, he controls the area under the basket. He's a top-notch rim protector. Offensively, he finished plays around the rim, but his other key skill is that he can pass out of the high post. He's not Vlade Divac, but you can run functional offense with him on the court. Dario Saric from Phoenix. Saric's second season in Philadelphia was a revelation. 15.6 points per game, 39.3% from three, 50.1% on twos. The 2 years since haven't gone nearly as well. He's 25, hasn't had any major injuries, though. That three-point mark in 2017 might be an outlier, but the rest of that player is still hiding somewhere. John Henson is the last one we'll talk about here. We always hunted for in the Memphis front office is good minimums. They're not the sexiest part of the offseason, but the random vets signed to the back-end rotation spots can have a big impact on the season if injuries hit. Henson is a great example of a good minimum. He turns 30 this year. He's never been a huge star or anything, and he slogged through last season on miserable teams in Cleveland and in Detroit. He's not a floor spacer. He's not much of a post-up threat, although he can get an awkward-looking hook shot that goes in with surprising frequency. Here's the thing, though. He's actually still pretty good. His lack of glamour could leave him floating around as one of the guys we're waiting on a minimum contract, and he's way more valuable than that. Henson is a good passer and screener. He's able to block shots around the rim, moves halfway decently on the perimeter, and can finish around the basket. He posts a PER of 17 last year and is a 17.1 for his career. He'll probably languish, forgotten in the early days of free agency, until a smart team in win now mode comes in and swoops him up. So there you go. There's some underrated, under the radar NBA teams. When we come back, we'll discuss SEC schools coming back to campus this fall.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
right, so as you probably know, I mean, the coronavirus is going on. It's been going on for way too long. I mean, not way too long. It's been going on for an appropriate amount of time, considering the health risk and the dangers of it. But it's been going on for a while now. And if you don't know, a lot of every university, except for I think Liberty, told their students just to stay home after spring break, and they pretty much moved to an online class schedule. They moved everything online, and then no more in-person meeting, or no more students on campus. Pretty much that happened a couple months ago. I believe classes just ended, especially here in the South. I don't know about the West. I know they do a different schedule over there. They do like a trimester. We do just regular semesters. So the school year is done. So now we need to think about the next school year, which starts in August, mid-August. We need to start thinking about that. And it is a huge debate whether or not schools are going to come back or not. Come back have students come back onto campus, have students in person for in-class instruction, which I've seen a lot of different things. I've seen some people consider, I've seen some of my friends consider just taking a semester off of college, just not spending that money because they didn't like the online experience. They prefer in-class instruction, so they much rather go out and just work a job or a part-time job or something like that, or just not do anything for a year or so until they can be back in class and do it that way. I've seen people say they will just go to a community college if everything's going to be online. You know, the in-person experience is the most important thing about college. I mean, what's the point of going to college if you're just going to sit at home with your parents all day and just do online school? No, I mean, people go to college to be out on their own and have new experiences and really grow as a person. I mean, that's the point of going to college, kind of. I mean, I think that's more important than the actual education you get from college. I think the biggest education you get from college is actually growing up and learning how to deal with the real world, if you will. So it's very important to some people that in-class instruction starts back up. Very important to some people. So we got news on Wednesday that South Carolina and Tennessee became the latest schools to announce their plans. They both plan on coming back in the fall. They join 12 other schools in a conference that a lot of people consider is the best conference in football, which is the Southeastern Conference, the SEC. So there's kind of an ulterior motive for these schools to be back because, of course, they get a lot of money from football. And football season, of course, happens in the fall. And the SEC makes the most money in football, as they always have a team in the college football playoffs, sometimes even two teams. And they usually have the most lucrative TV deal out of every conference. With CBS and with ESPN, with the SEC network and the CBS weekly game. So the SEC has a reason that they want football back. And because of this, 14 schools of the Southeastern Conference have indicated, all but one of the 14 schools of the Southeastern Conference have indicated that they plan to reopen their college campuses for the fall semester, a step widely believed to be needed to resume football and other sports. South Carolina and Tennessee on Wednesday became the latest schools in the nation's top football conference, announced their plans, joining Florida, Alabama, LSU, and others. The only school that has not announced its plans for the fall, and it is not shocking whatsoever, it is Vanderbilt. Dang it, Vanderbilt. What are you doing? I mean, no, it makes complete sense for Vanderbilt to be a little skeptical about it. I mean, they're Vanderbilt. But every other school has been more vocal in their intentions to reopen their buildings, while students and faculty participate for now in remote learning through the summer because of the coronavirus pandemic. South Carolina President Bob Castellan said the Columbia campus will resume in-person instruction in mid-August. We will follow clear public health protocols, including social distancing within classrooms, lecture halls, meeting rooms, and sports venues, with strong encouragement of proper social distancing off campus. So that brings up a question. how would that work? Because if you've ever been in a university classroom, not a lecture hall, but like a regular classroom, they're kind of tiny. There are, in my experience, I went to Clemson, so I don't know about South Carolina's experience, but in my experience, most of the time those classes were overfilled. Most of the time, like, usually had one or two people that struggled to find a chair. Like, we had to go to an empty classroom, drag a chair out of there so they can sit down somewhere. So that I mean, these classes are already overfilling because South Carolina, of course, is a bigger college than Clemson, so they're probably more readily they're more readily available to plan for stuff like that. But I'm just saying, in my experience, because that's the only experience I can really talk about. But in my experience, we always had overflowing classrooms. So how are you going to get everyone the class that they need to be in while social distancing? Because if you social distance in a small classroom like that, that means you're going to have to limit the amount of people that are in it further. Like, say you can have 45 people in the class, you're going to have to cut that down to at least 20, at most 30. You're going to have to cut it down. So, I mean, some people are not getting the classes that they need to graduate, which means they're kind of taking a dead semester, at least when it comes in terms of that class. So I don't know how that's going to work. Lecture halls is a little bit more, but lecture halls, they usually pack in 200 to 300 people in a room. So either they're going to have you're either going to have more class periods, just more classes available, period. And then, or I don't know how they're going to do that. That makes a little bit less sense to me. Tennessee President Randy Boyd said the university plans to bring back students for on-campus experience this fall. Reopening campuses is seen as a mandatory step before sports can resume. The commissioners of the nation's major college football leagues have stressed that college sports cannot return from the shutdown until campuses have reopened, which makes complete sense, because if the campus is not safe enough for the students, why is it safe enough to have sporting events? I mean, that's just facts. Dr. Brian Hainline, the NCAA's chief medical officer, has also said widespread testing for the coronavirus will be crucial to having college sports in the fall, especially contact sports such as football and basketball. At LSU interim president Tom Gallican said there are definite plans to return to campus in the fall, even if details about football remain unclear. It may be a little different in some ways, but I think it's important to play the season, and I hope we do so. The season is scheduled to begin August 29th, though SEC schools don't begin play until the following week. SEC officials continue to strike an optimistic tone along with their member schools. Our current focus is on preparing to play the 2020 football season as scheduled. If it is determined that we must pivot to another solution in the interest of public health, we'll do so in the appropriate time. Auburn is also planning to reopen their campus, but said in a statement the university will announce its detailed plans no later than early July, so they're kind of waiting it out just to see if things change. Joe Glover, Florida's provost and senior vice president for academic affairs, said his school expects to announce plans for the fall by mid-July. Florida trustees approved moving the first day of fall classes from August 24th to August 31st. Provide more time to prepare, even if it's just 1 week. Gators, they open against Eastern Washington on September 5th. Missouri announced plans to reopen in the fall, but warned of a new normal. Texas A&M President Michael K. Young said that the plan in College Station is to be fully open and operational in the fall. While we know online classes are an option if needed, we plan to be fully open and operational with dedicated faculty and staff leading into preparing for all the requirements necessary to do so safely across academics, athletics, and campus activities. And the Arkansas Board of Trustees have instructed university officials to prepare to reopen the system campuses in the fall. Other league members such as Mississippi and Kentucky have all done the same. So there you have it. The SEC, their schools are starting to open up campuses. They all realize that you have to open up campuses to make football a possibility. So they are all planning on opening up their campuses right now. Of course, I hope everything gets better by then. We still have 3 months. You have all of May, June, and July, and then most of August to figure all this stuff out. Of course, I want college football back, but I want it back in the safest way possible. And I just hope that these schools aren't putting their students in danger just to get football back, because that's just absurd. I know it's a lot of money and it funds athletic departments and stuff like that, but you are talking about the most important part of your university, which is the students. You're talking about putting them in danger just for just sports. When we come back, we'll talk about the Earl Thomas situation that kind of unfolded. It came out last night. So we'll discuss that when we return.
Are you looking to get your college football fixed? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Well, I got to tell y'all, I woke up this morning to record this show early in the morning here, and I got a weird notification from CNN. And I have the CNN app. I don't really follow CNN, but it is nice to have notifications of like world events happening. So I get a notification, and it's about Earl Thomas. It says Earl Thomas. Well, no, first off, the headline said NFL star held at gunpoint. And I was like, what happened? What did I miss? Apparently Earl Thomas. It was Earl Thomas, and he was held at gunpoint by his wife in a blow-up over alleged cheating. So this came out last night, around 8 o'clock. Unfortunately, my source on this is TMZ Sports, but I mean, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, it was on CNN. Which to some people that is not a very reliable source, but when I Googled it, this is the first thing that popped up, and I mean, this is what everybody was linking to on Twitter, so I guess this is where we're going. We're going to TMZ, I guess. I mean, why not? So let's just go through it. Let's try to figure this out. So NFL star Earl Thomas is lucky to be alive after cops say his wife held a loaded gun less than a foot from his head after she allegedly caught him cheating with another woman. It's all spelled out in court documents obtained by TMZ Sports detailing a violent April 13th altercation involving the Baltimore Ravens player Nina Thomas and several other people. The Austin Police Department responded to a home in Austin, Texas area at 3:41 a.m. after getting a call about a disturbance. When cops arrived, they say, "We observed that a black female wearing an orange sweater with a knife in her hand, later identified as Nina Thomas, was chasing a shirtless black male, later identified as Earl Thomas, with a pistol in his hand around a vehicle. Cops drew their weapons and ordered Nina and Earl to the ground, and they complied without incident. That's when the investigation began." And I hate TMZ because it says things got wild. I'm not going to say that. Well, I just did, but anyways. Nina's story, according to the court documents, Nina claims Earl, who is 30 years old, left their home earlier in the day after an argument over the NFL players drinking. She claims Earl's brother, Seth Thomas, picked him up. But a short time later, she decided to check on his whereabouts by logging into a Snapchat account. Interesting. That's when she says she found a video of Earl with another woman. Nina says she used Earl's Snapchat account to track his location to a nearby Airbnb rental home, and says she called up 2 other women to help her confront Earl at the pad. Nina also claims she grabbed Earl's pistol, a 9mm Beretta, in the process with the intention to scare him. When the woman arrived at the house, they discovered Earl and Seth naked in the bed with other women. With his brother? Interesting. That's when Nina admits she pulled out the gun and put it to Earl's head, stating that she took out the magazine thinking that the gun could not fire. The cops say Nina was unaware that the gun had a round in the chamber. So, fun. Cops say one of the women in the house shot cell phone video of the incident, which they say shows Nina pointing the gun at Earl's head from less than a foot away, and it can be clearly be seen that Nina's finger was on the trigger and safety was disengaged. I highly doubt you can see that clearly, but whatever. Fortunately for Earl, cops say the Ravens defensive back was able to wrestle the gun away from her. Cops say the cell phone video also shows Nina striking Earl in the nose before it ends. Cops also spoke with Earl, who essentially corroborated with the story, adding that Nina repeatedly hit him while he attempted to take the firearm away. In an interview with Earl's alleged mistress at the scene, she claimed Nina also threatened her and the other woman in the house, pointing the gun at them, yelling, "I got something for all you hoes," which is just fun to say. The woman claims one of Nina's other friends was carrying a knife, swinging it aggressively during the altercation as well. After speaking with everyone, cops ultimately arrested Nina and both members of her posse. Nina was booked for burglary, oh my god, I can't say that word, can I? Of a residence with intent to commit aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, family violence, and later bonded out. Earl was not arrested. Court records show Nina was also hit with an emergency protective order requiring her to stay 200 yards away from Earl and his alleged mistress. As TMZ previously reported, Earl and Nina were married in an extravagant wedding back in April 2016. Russell Wilson and Sierra even attended the ceremony. Earl is one of the best defensive players in the NFL, 7-time Pro Bowler, defensive back who won a Super Bowl with the Seahawks, key part of the Legion of Boom. We all know that. Nina's attorney told TMZ Sports, "I am here to declare that my client unequivocally and categorically denies these allegations, and we look forward to our day in court where we can clear her good name." We also reached out to Earl Thomas for comment before we published this story, said TMZ Sports, and he released a statement on social media. Instead of talking about us, just keep us in y'all's prayers. Stuff like this happens. Okay, it does not just happen. We try to live the best lives we possibly can. Sometimes it doesn't go as planned. So that's the TMZ article. So let's break this down, because the reason I found out, another reason I found out about it, because I went on Twitter this morning and I saw a bunch of people talking about this subject. And a lot of people were wondering if the NFL would have to step in. And the NFL shouldn't have to step in. I mean, this is not a domestic violence. Well, it's technically a domestic violence thing, but it's not a player committing the domestic violence. I mean, adultery is not the best. It's not great, but it's also not illegal in the eyes of the law. I mean, you can, whatever your personal, however you feel personally, adultery is not illegal. It's not illegal, especially probably not in Texas. Well, actually, it might be illegal in Texas, but it's not. I mean, he wasn't arrested. He didn't hold a gun to anybody. He just got the gun away from her, stuff like that. So the NFL should not get involved at all. I mean, this is definitely a personal matter. There's nothing the NFL can really do. I mean, are you going to suspend Earl Thomas just for being a part of this situation? I mean, this is kind of a this is an extremely personal situation that got out, that leaked, and got out, and everybody's talking about it now. So, I mean, you want to say that Earl Thomas needs to be reprehended, but it's not illegal. It's not. And I'm trying to go around I'm trying to kind of dance around this, because I mean, Earl Thomas is definitely in the wrong in this situation for, cheating. However, Nina did not need to bring a gun. I think that was a little, in her defense, she thought it was completely unloaded. There was nothing in it. I mean, she didn't know that there was one in the chamber, but I mean, still, I think that's a little extra. But, yeah. What a situation. But like I said, the NFL does not need to be involved in this, but there is a lot of questions in this, such as being found in a bed with 2 women and his brother. That's interesting. We're not going to touch that, though. Her having access to his Snapchat just randomly. I guess she knew his password. I didn't even know you could just randomly sign into someone's Snapchat. Randomly. Thought there was like a 2-way authentication system or something. So that's interesting to me. Very bizarre story that can only happen in this day and age of the coronavirus. The only thing. And their wedding, I never saw their wedding because I don't care. But Earl Thomas came out in like a crown and a cape at his wedding, which is stupid. This whole thing is stupid. But anyways, like I said, NFL shouldn't get involved in this. Keeping this strictly sports related, NFL shouldn't get involved in this as a completely personal matter. It's not. It's like I said, it's just personal. It's a personal matter. Earl Thomas didn't get arrested. His wife got arrested. His wife, as far as I'm concerned, is not part of the NFL. But yeah, he got arrested. So I mean, he should not be punished for any of this. I mean, it seems like he's getting punished enough by this being public already. So I don't know what to tell you. But when we come back, we'll be doing our draft recap with the Washington Redskins, who had the number 2 pick overall, when we return.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC, Invicta FC, Bellator, and one championship. We got the fights covered. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
All right, everybody, let's get into it. Our draft analysis, our daily draft analysis here on Topic 6. We'll talk about the Redskins draft today, as they were the number 2 pick in the draft, so it just makes sense at that point. With a new coach, Ron Rivera, he and the Vice President of Player Personnel, Kyle Smith, completed their first draft together. So let's see how they did. They made 8 picks, traded away one perennial Pro Bowl left tackle, signed the son of a Hall of Famer, and overall added 12 new players to the roster. And after unloading Trent Williams onto the San Francisco 49ers for a 5th in this year's draft and a 3rd in the 2021 draft, Washington now has the 2nd most cap space in the NFL with $35.6 million. So let's kick it off with their first round pick, the number 2 overall pick, Chase Young. Obviously, in 2019, his stats, he had 46 tackles, 21 tackles for loss, 16.5 sacks, and then 7 forced fumbles. So make your strength stronger. That's what Rivera preached in the build-up to the draft. There was background noise created when he mentioned that the team was going to meet with the top 2 quarterbacks in the 2020 class, but ultimately that proved to be a red herring and something to keep people talking. The same with the idea of Washington trading back in the draft. It was all merely mirrors and smoke screens as the team set its sidelines on the Upper Marlboro, Maryland native and former Buckeye. Rivera and Smith turned in the pick for a consensus top player in this year's draft with more than 5 minutes remaining on the clock to select him. That's how much they had to mull over going young or in any other direction. Defensive coordinator Jack Del Rio, who has worked with Julius Peppers, Von Miller, Khalil Mack over the years, believes Young has the potential to be better than all of them. That's remarkably high praise, but not surprising seeing his coaching staff genuinely believes he'll improve not only Washington's defense, but the entire team, creating turnovers or forcing the opposing quarterback into more mistakes. It'll make for a circle calendar matchup based on the current 2020 schedule when Young and his new team travel to Santa Clara, California to face the 49ers and their new left tackle, former Pro Bowler Trent Williams. So their next pick, which was in the 3rd round, Antonio Gibson from Memphis, who was picked in third round, 66th overall, running back / receiver. Last year in 2019, he had 33 carries, 369 yards, 4 touchdowns, 38 receptions for 735 yards, and 8 touchdowns. Several reasons you gotta like this pick. First, from the front office to the head coach to the offensive coordinator, Scott Turner, the entire organization was on the same page about selecting Gibson. Turner articulated a plan for how he'd use him in the scheme. Then Smith and Rivera grabbed him with the early third-round selection. That's a level of cohesion that hasn't been present in this building for years. Second, Gibson gives Turner another player he can move all over the formation and will force defensive coordinators to really guess what the team is about to throw at their units. And Gibson isn't the kind of player an opposing team wants to lose track of, as he tied for the fastest 40-yard dash with a 4.39 among running backs in the 2020 Scouting Combine. If he gets behind the defense, it's not far-fetched to believe that quarterback Dwayne Haskins, with the arm strength he has, will be able to lay it on Gibson. Gibson's attitude about how he fits in. He's got a pretty good attitude. He prefers not getting caught up in whether he's a running back or receiver. Simply put, he wants to be thought of as a weapon. So there you go. 4th round pick is Sadiq Charles from LSU. 4th round, 108th overall, offensive tackle. From a positional standpoint, you got to like the pick, especially in light of the team trading away Trent Williams for a 5th round pick. Just moments before they take this, it makes perfect sense. What remains to be seen is if the team's faith in him after several failed drug tests in college is rewarded, and how the battle at left tackle pans out whenever practices begin. Charles was part of the Joe Moore award-winning offensive line unit at LSU, given to the best group annually. Smith and Rivera said they felt like they got a great value pick in the 4th round for him and believe he has the tools for a large role. Charles has a lot of talent, but has to improve some of his blocking techniques. We'll see what happens when Charles, Sharon Christian, and Cornelius Lucas battle it out without having seen 2 of the 3 potential starters. This is the position battle I'm most interested in seeing, given the impact on Haskins' ability to have a strong sophomore season. Next up, 4th round selection, Antonio Gandy Golden, wide receiver, going 142nd overall. 2019 stats, he had 79 catches for 1,396 yards and 10 touchdowns. He reminds people of Calvin Johnson. That's right, Megatron. He's a 6-time Pro Bowler, 3-time first-team All-Pro for the Lions. Rivera says he sees someone who is a big physical receiver. He's got good size, good speed, good play speed. He's a physical player. He's a guy that can make his presence felt. We believe in the red zone, certain short yardage situations. Draft analysts widely praise the value that Washington got with this pick, with Turner getting a player who can potentially sign into the X position opposite of Terry McLaurin. Gandy Golden's catch radius is absolutely absurd, and he's coming to the burgundy and gold following 3 consecutive seasons with 10 touchdowns apiece. He's also bowled a perfect game in bowling. So there you go. That's important. Keith Ismail, San Diego State, 5th round, 156th overall pick. He's a center. Rivera once told the local media that a team is truly only as good as its depth and the players who'd be asked to come up in case a starter goes down. For a team that has dealt with injury issues along the offensive line in the past few seasons, the organization's commitment to bringing quality depth along with player development level players was a welcome sight, and especially Ismail, a player who didn't miss any time essentially in college, with 27 starts at center and 10 at right guard. Ismail fits the prototype of drafting players who have a primary position, but the ability to be versatile too. Brandon Scherf is the unquestioned starter at right guard, but in case he deals with the injury bug the way he has the last 3 seasons, 15 games missed, then Ismail should be prepared to step up and fill in. 5th round, 162nd overall pick is an outside linebacker / safety, Khalik Hudson out of Michigan. He had 102 tackles, 3.5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, and 3 passes defended. Like Gibson, Hudson is someone who played all over the place in college and has the kind of versatility that the staff was looking for. Between the blocked punts, he had 5, which is a Michigan record, and the numbers he put up as a sophomore, which was 83 tackles, 18.5 tackles for loss, 11 passes defended, 8 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, and an interception. this is an extremely good value pickup. He's obviously 2 years removed from putting up those numbers, but if he's able to even slightly replicate that kind of production, then he'll be another feather in the late round gem cap of Smith without knowing exactly where the team will use him predominantly. Then we have Cameron Curl from Arkansas, round 7 pick, 216th overall. He's a safety. 2019 stats, he had 76 tackles, 4 passes defended, 4 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, 2 interceptions, and 2 forced fumbles. He has experience playing both corner and safety. Washington kind of addressed his lack of depth at cornerback position and simultaneously added more depth in a strong safety position. Curl wasn't much in the way of a playmaker for the Razorbacks, recording only 2 interceptions his entire career in Fayetteville. But Ron Cooper, his former defensive backs coach at Arkansas, said, "I've had some great safeties in my time, and he's working his way into being a dominant guy." Mel Kiper liked the size and physical tools he possessed, though he's yet to master any one particular element. That said, he's done a decent job at various things he's been tasked to do, so upside is apparent. James Smith Williams from NC State, round 7, 229th overall. His 2019 stats, 20 tackles, 1 tackle for loss, and 1 sack over 7 games. This is a lone pick that has you scratching your head. Smith Williams certainly has the leadership and character the new regime likes to see, but outside of that, he's injury prone throughout his time in Raleigh, and you genuinely wonder if there weren't other positions the team could have committed this pick to. In addition to the injuries, it's noted that Smith Williams became engaged with blockers. He struggled to escape their grasp and didn't have great speed turning the corner when rushing. Outside of his redshirt junior year, when Smith Williams had 40 tackles, 9.5 tackles for loss, 6 sacks, 3 passes defended, his production in college didn't jump off the page, you know? Combine that with a crowded defensive line room for the burgundy and gold, and I'm curious to see if he even makes the team when the team gets to roster cut down day. So, the main question for the Washington Redskins that they needed to address was the tight end position. They have Jeremy Sprinkle and Hale Hintage, free agent signees Logan Thomas and Richard Rodgers Jr. Tight end has been a position of weakness for at least last season and a half with injuries suffered to the starters and lack productivity. Smith said the team did address the position in the addition of Thomas, who the staff, has potentially really surprised people. Then they signed Thaddeus Moss. So overall, the Redskins built depth, and they really built depth, and they kind of helped just build out the roster a little bit more. Although they had some outside of Chase Young, they didn't really have any amazing picks, but they had a lot of decent picks that are good enough to kind of be a good base for the Redskins here. So that's it for the draft recap for the Washington Redskins. Thank you for listening, everybody. That is it for the Thursday edition of the show. I hope you enjoyed it. You can, if you liked the podcast, you can like, rate, and subscribe anywhere you get your podcast. You can follow me on Twitter at Strickland_Josh, and I will talk to y'all on Sunday.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.